Okay, I just want to make it clear that it has been 462 days since March 28th, 2021, the day Mick Schumacher entered his first Formula One race. And today, 462 days later, he finally has his points.
Welcome back to Break Check. This is episode 19, post British Grand Prix recap. Crazy race, best race of the year. Might be the best race I've ever seen live. It's up there with Abu Dhabi for me. A lot to talk about with the race. As per usual, Megan and I will go through some noteworthy things, some news cycle talking points. And then we will get into the race because there's a ton to cover. Megan, just initial thoughts. How you doing? How you feeling? You're alive for this recording?
I am alive. I am not,
Perfect.
visibly hungover this time. So I think that's progress. Things have obviously died down events-wise in my life. So, other than the 4th of July this weekend, things are pretty calm. So that's exciting. But yeah, the race was insane. My mom and I were just yelling for half of it on and off.
Yeah, me and my dad were in the garage, just losing our minds.
Yeah, it was intense, especially those last 12 laps. I mean, I couldn't stop watching. I had no idea how to feel at any given point.
That's some of the best racing I've ever seen. Crazy they kept it clean. We'll obviously get more into that later in the episode. Do you want to start us off with some news?
Sure. Yeah. So I think one news fact or thing that stood out this week was that Aston Martin announced that this would be their last weekend of major upgrades before focusing on 2023. And I don't know if this is like in all sports as well too, but to just think that we're only in the start of July and they're already focusing on next year's car. I mean, to be fair, I don't think that they have, any outstanding car to provide this year. So it's probably in their best interest to start as soon as possible. So, kind of getting ahead of maybe some of these other teams and starting before the summer break, I think is a good move on their part. And, Vettel did pretty well this weekend as well. I mean, he had a rough start in qualifying, but he still finished in points this weekend. So I think good move on them. I don't know if you have any thoughts on Car and Aston Martin.
We've seen a little bit of talk about this the last couple of weeks. I think Christian Horner kind of started mentioning that teams are going to start struggling or they're going to stop bringing upgrades because they're just running out of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Aston Martin's kind of been the first team that has explicitly come out and been like, hey, yeah, we're done this year. Not done, but we're going to start looking towards next year. I don't think it's the worst idea in the world if you kind of know where your season is headed. Probably a bit tougher of a call for teams like McLaren or teams like Haas, who have shown some potential.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference of 4th and 7th is probably a pretty big deal for them.
Yeah.
So hopefully this means we see a more competitive Aston Martin car next year, whether that is Porsche, Aston Martin, or whatever that might look like. And then, so another thing that we wanted to touch on before the race, Sebastian Vettel drove the 1992 Williams car with carbon neutral gas. This kind of a big deal because of F1 announcing that by 2030, they're going to be net zero on carbon emissions. And yeah, it's something we wanted to talk about. I think it's a really cool thing because it's something that F1 could easily just kind of brush to the side as an inevitable part of the sport, and we as fans would also be like, yeah, we love the sport, this just kind of comes with it. These guys obviously are doing a lot of flying around constantly in private jets, a lot of them. The cars obviously, exhaust fumes, not the best thing in the world for the environment. So this is just something that's kind of a necessary evil in the sport, and one that would be easy to just look to the side for. But I think it's very cool that they are going out of their way to acknowledge, like, hey, this is one of the worst parts of our sport. Here's what we want to do about it, and here's when we want to do it by. Because it'd be easy to just say, oh, we're going to do this, this, and this, or we're going to look at doing this, this, and that. But by giving that time of 2030, I think it's going to be able to hold them accountable to continue to push this initiative. I know they are looking for gas alternatives for the cars. One of the big ones, which makes sense because it's probably the biggest, carbon emitter in F1, is the travel for the teams, the mechanics, the drivers, flying to different places on tight schedules, getting the cars there. That all is pretty bad for the environment. So I think that is one of their big focuses with this. And then I did read a little bit about potentially them kind of looking into and addressing like more sustainable ways for fans to get to and from races, because like for me and Megan, we're in America. We obviously we have races here, but even then, like, we would have to drive over 1,000 miles to the closest one. Any of them. Honestly, I think Austin's the closest one, and that's like a 20-hour drive.
Yeah.
And then if we wanted to go to anything in Europe, we're taking 12-hour flights. So I think good on them. I definitely something that I'm going to keep a close eye on. I think it's interesting. I think it's important. I know I just rambled on for a bit. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge step. I think it's a necessary step too. You see a lot with, large corporations and stuff, and having this corporate social responsibility of needing to meet certain criterias or just do things, say that they're going to do things better or make changes, and then they may seem a little minuscule or you never really see the results. In Formula One, I think you're really going to see the change because it's obviously going to change the performance of the car and what the car is using, and then also maybe the structure even of Formula One. And that could even be changing the layout of the calendar. So, you'll have races where they were flying from Europe to Canada and then back to Europe, where, instead you could just wait for Canada for when you're already in the US. And then,
exactly.
It's like little changes like that. I think we're going to start to see in the next couple of years come before 2030. So I think, it's a huge commitment for them to try and accomplish that in 8 years, but I think it's feasible, and I'm excited to see, what they, start to do first.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially the stacking the calendar in a different way. There's no reason that they can't, in like a 6-7 week period, have Montreal, Austin, Vegas, Miami, and Mexico City.
Yeah.
And, you're doing less flying around because you can probably trailer the cars to the different, races. And yeah, just little things like that. I think, like I said, it's an easy thing for them. It would have been an easy thing for them to just kind of be like, it's just kind of how it is. But happy that they're taking initiative.
And then no more news necessarily, at least that we're going to be covering. But I did learn one rule during the race that I wanted to highlight, and that was that a red flag in the first lap before the lap is completed means that they'll start from the original grid position. And we'll get into it a little bit more when we talk about the race too. But I do think that had some impact on how the overall outcome was, because as you saw in the very first lap of the start of the race, Verstappen overtook, right away. And then Hamilton was all the way up in third. And I think it really kind of changed the outcome of the race. So, fun fact that I had learned. I'm sure more people knew that, but
I did not. Yeah, I had no idea. It makes sense, but as we'll talk about, definitely probably a little upsetting for some of the drivers, but it is what it is.
We are also introducing a new segment. Whether it sticks, whether people like it, I'm not sure. How often we do it, I am also unsure, but I also don't have a full name for it. I'm going to call it for now the Twitter Hall of Fame, where we highlight a funny Twitter or funny tweet that we think, is a funny tweet that we think is good and worthy for other people to laugh at, because I send one probably like 10 to 20 a week because people are hilarious. And I like the humor. So this week's it was from @RBRSeb, and it says, George Russell is the type of guy to wiggle his fingers and say, "Don't mind if I do," when offered food. He embodies like the Midwestern dad. You know what I mean?
I think the other day I said that George Russell was, when talking about who the hottest drivers on the grid was, I said that George Russell was the guy that I want to take home during the holidays to wear matching sweaters with my family. I think that tweet just kind of encapsulates just how much of a sweetheart he is.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and then so many people were responding to it too, and was like, George is the type of guy to say, "Let's rock and roll before we leave the restaurant," or "No more Mr. Nice Guy" before getting into a fight.
What's the damage before they get the bill?
Yes.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think George I think acts a little older than he is, but I think that's part of the charm with him. I think it's part of the reason I've actually grown to like him quite a bit.
Qualifying.
Yeah, qualifying. Another wet qualifying, dry race. Second week in a row, I think. That always not as wacky of a grid this time, but Carlos with the pole.
Carlos with the pole. Latifi. We can't forget about Latifi in there.
Q3 Latifi.
I was moving my sister to Chicago when qualifying was happening. So I texted Juan, what's going on? Anything crazy? And you were like, Latifi, Q3. And I was like, Latifi, what? He's where?
He was putting down some laps. Like in the wet, he was composed. He was controlled. He looked like an F1 driver.
And he didn't have the upgrades that Albon had either, which is even more like
something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's impressive. I mean, he was just out of points, I think, this race. I think he was maybe P11, P12 or something like that. So it sucks that he didn't get any points. Oh, yeah, he was P12, but because now he's 20th in the constructors, or in the drivers, not 21st.
He passed Nico. Yeah. While Latifi was putting on a masterclass, Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen both did full 360s just while driving, and then saved them and kept going. Max did a full 360, kept going, finished the lap, and still had the second fastest time.
Which is bonkers to me. Like when I saw that, the Red Bull, it just shows how impressive the Red Bull is this year. I mean, they are dominating it when it comes to the other compared to the other teams. I mean, yikes. I can't imagine what that lap would have looked like had he not spun out. I'm sure he obviously probably would have been on pole at that point.
But... but Carlos, first pole, I think, right? Yeah, it was his first career pole position.
Hell yeah, good for him. It's a whole weekend for him.
Yeah, no, Carlos did great. We can just, unless you have anything else about qualifying, we can just swing into the race.
All right.
I don't have any notes for the race. I watched the whole thing. I don't have notes because I didn't even know what to write. So I have a pretty good memory. I can just talk off the fly, and that's what I wanted to do because I wanted to have like a genuine reaction to everything I'm going to say. This was the craziest race I've ever seen.
From the start, going into that crash, it just didn't light up. I mean, the start of the race the second time was intense, and then those last 12 laps when there was a yellow flag was also crazy. So, I mean, you were just constantly on your toes. Usually I'll try and guess, who the driver of the week or who, is going to win the race and make those, graphics ahead of time. I couldn't this race. No. There was no way because it was always it kept changing,
And just even, we'll start off with the crash. Anyone who was still against the Halos after today should have their mind changed. I think Zhou might have died if he didn't have it.
100%. His head would have been gone. I mean, the way that it was skidding, his head was still it wasn't even fully in the car. The halo is what kept him from being just knocked out, immediately. I mean, oh, it's so scary. And then between that and then him pinned between the fence and the barriers, did you see the spectator view of the crash? Yeah. I mean, I think that did you see the pole or something fell too, and people were trying to run back? Oh man, I mean, he was going over 100 miles an hour easily going into that. Yeah, that was the scariest crash I think I've seen since I started watching F1 myself. It's the scariest crash I've seen live. Yeah. I'm really glad he's okay. That could have been very bad, but I think 5 cars were mixed up. 6 cars were mixed up. 6 cars. Yeah. I was going to say, at the same time that was happening, Vettel bumped Albon and spun Albon into a wall, and then he, bumped back and hit 3 cars or he messed up Ocon, Tsunoda, and someone else. There was like 6 cars though that were just like all in shambles pretty much. And then go on.
Alex got hit around like a ping pong ball.
Mm-hmm.
He got hit by, I think, 3 different cars.
Yeah.
So yeah, crazy. A red flag immediately off the jump. Like Megan said, we found out that if there's a red flag on the first lap or before the first lap is completed, you go back to the starting grid position. This was tough because off the jump, Max got Carlos. Like, it wasn't close, and Lewis jumped 2 positions.
Which was I blinked.
It was crazy.
He was up there. Yeah, so that was tough for them. And then going into the next start, the second start, Sainz was obviously much more prepared for that aggression from Max.
And responded with some aggression.
I was like, ooh.
Yeah, the restart was pretty intense. Carlos almost pushing Max off the track. Lewis getting passed by Lando off the jump. And that would set the tone for the rest of this race. We can just kind of go team by team, how we usually do. We can start with Red Bull because what looked like it was going to be a good race, then turned disappointing, then was saved by Checo at the end. Every emotion experienced by the Red Bull racing team. What do you think?
Man, I mean, first of all, Checo, he not that he came out of nowhere, but he was in the back after the start of the race. When he had some damage and had to go and pit, and they had to go and replace a bunch of stuff. I mean, he was set so far back. I mean, I thought it was just like an end race for him pretty much. You know, I thought he was going to maybe be 14, 13, whatever. If he was lucky, and, you know, suddenly, you know, come lap, 12 laps to go, he was in 4th and just freaking like getting up there into 2nd. So incredible performance from him. I think the team really needed it, just given Verstappen had some damage from Checo's car. It seems like he hit some of the carbon that was on the side of the road, because they don't move it, they didn't like call any flags or anything, so it was still there. And because he had just gone off a little bit of the track limits, you know, he picked it up, and that ultimately hurt him in his performance. And, you know, he was, having to defend against Latifi and Mick and some of these other drivers that normally he never has to see. So really tough race for him. I wish they pulled him. So like, I don't know why they had him finish the race. I mean, yes, he finished 7th. He had some points, but for what? I mean, how much damage does his car have now that maybe, could have been less if you didn't keep him on the track?
One thing I wanted to say, if he had not gotten held up a bit by Charles at the end, Checo might have won this race. Checo and Lewis were cooking the last like 10 laps of the race, and they got slowed down by Charles a little bit, which we'll talk about Ferrari in a second. Last thing on Red Bull before we get into Ferrari, I wanted to note, Max had a dud of a race. Not a good race, barely any points. Max had a bad race, and Charles was only able to make up 6 points on his lead. That's unacceptable, because every time Charles has messed up, Max is there to clean it up, take the points, win the race. Max messes up for the first time in what feels like ever. And, Charles just isn't there. Whether that is a driver thing, team thing, car thing, either way, can't happen and has to be, honestly, might be too late at this point.
I mean, when it comes to Charles and when it comes to Ferrari, we could probably just talk about Ferrari now. But I mean, man, that team is just like doing anything but letting Charles get the points, get a win. It seems like an uphill battle for him. And it's so unfortunate because he was there. I mean, this was probably one of his best races in his career, in my opinion, for Charles. He did incredible. I don't really think he could have done anything differently, because it wasn't up to him anymore. It was the team. And come lap 12, and I do want to mention this, like when they were starting to race again after the yellow flag, they told Carlos to give him like 10 car space, like let him have that moment for a minute, get that speed up, and then, then go at it. But as soon as that flag was dropped and they were able to start racing, Carlos was like, and just, started fighting his teammate right away. And it
Yes.
slowed both of them down, obviously, because they're trying to compete, which really what allowed Perez to just come up out of nowhere and then start fighting Charles. So by the time that, Carlos was able to get ahead, Charles is kind of left there with the pieces, fighting for his life, trying to get, on the podium, and ultimately he ended up in fourth. So
potentially, definitely the race defining moment for me. What I think could be a season defining moment for Ferrari towards the end of the race, as it was winding down and kind of the order was kind of sorting itself out. Charles Leclerc was first, Carlos Sainz was second, Lewis Hamilton was third. Charles was on older, hard tires, and for some reason, Ferrari did not pit Charles, pit Carlos, and Lewis also pit immediately. Good reaction time by Mercedes responding to the move. I think they had like 11 seconds to react.
Yeah.
Carlos and Lewis pitted, got on their soft tires. Lewis struggled a little bit with the soft tires the first couple laps, but Carlos immediately got past Leclerc. I thought Leclerc was going to win, and the race started up again, and Carlos immediately made a move on him. I think that could be a moment that Ferrari and Charles look back on as maybe the beginning of the end of this season for them. I don't want to say it's over, because you think that they're still the biggest competition to Max from running away with it, but I really do not think. I know that Ferrari will not win the constructors this year, and I really do not think that Charles has a chance at the driver championship anymore.
Yeah, it's hard, and I know Ferrari has been so set on, not doing the team orders, not having, a first and second driver, but at the same time, you're faulting yourself, because there were so many points in this race where you could have let Charles had a bigger lead time, but you were instead, like, because Carlos was first and you didn't want them fighting off one another, you're like, no, it's fine, just stay where you are, like, keep pushing. And then also, 5 seconds behind, you have Hamilton, fastest lap, like, picking up speed. You're messaging me, it was like suddenly he was 2 seconds behind, and a couple laps ago he was 5 seconds behind. So I think they made a couple of mistakes, and unfortunately it's hurting Charles and their chances at a championship win. I think it's a good lesson for them to learn and to look back, and I think moving forward we might start to see them be a little bit more communicative with who does what and who is where. And I think they're going to have to after this. I'm happy for Carlos. He deserved the win. It was a long time coming. There have been so many times where he could have won and he didn't. So I'm so happy for him. But at the same time, I do think that they're going to start prioritizing Charles's performance a little bit more, in the chance that, he has the speed and he's there and everything, and, being a little bit more stern with the team orders.
One, I wanted to make sure, thank you, we gave Carlos his props for winning his first race on his 150th try. That he had the second longest streak of all time of races without a win. Checo had been first before he got his first win. Secondly, I want to try and say this without being like clickbaity, reactionary. There's obviously a lot of discussion around team orders, and Lewis obviously got him a ton with Bottas. Max gets them a ton with Checo. It's just kind of how it goes. However, there are times where teams let these guys race, and normally the better driver, Lewis was always faster than Valtteri. Max is almost always faster than Checo. Just, Lando's always beating Daniel when they're allowed to race.
Yeah.
Charles has trouble beating Carlos when he's not given team orders.
That's not a bad point.
And it's kind of like a recurring thing that I've noticed, and I don't think it happens enough. It hasn't happened enough for me to like bring it up, I don't think it's a big indictment on Charles as a driver, because he's obviously very fast. But there is a contingency of F1 Twitter, F1 fans who like to say that Charles is a time trial merchant. He just puts down fast laps but can't race. I do think it's worth keeping an eye on as we maybe get more team orders from them. I think of the number one drivers, I think Charles has the most trouble beating Carlos.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I know, especially on F1 Twitter, I've seen a lot about Carlos being in, just more negative comments like, oh,
Yeah.
Charles is obviously, the number one. Carlos just can't perform enough or as consistently. He doesn't have the pace. And while he doesn't always have the pace that Charles has, I don't think that necessarily makes him like any lesser or at worse of a driver than Charles, because when it comes at the end of the day, when it comes to racing, Carlos is always there. He's overtaking, he's competitive. We saw a little bit more aggression from him this race, and I thought that was really impressive and ultimately got him the win. So I think, maybe a little less doubt on Carlos and, just kind of watching how the rest of the season plays out. But yeah, I don't know what to expect for them for the rest of the season. I don't expect a championship though either.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think there is another team on the up and up who we can talk about. Drivers on the up and up. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell and the Mercedes team. I think they will finish in second in the constructors.
Ooh.
And I don't know. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I think Lewis is growing little streaks of confidence the last couple of weeks, along with the car seeming to be really fast again. Because Lewis was the fastest man on the track all day. I think he can win a couple races after the summer break.
Oh yeah, I think he's gonna pull a Daniel Ricciardo from last year's summer break and just come out and just win. I think it's Monza or something before, but I would love to see that happen. I think it's definitely coming. George has been an incredible surprise this year too. He's been the most consistent driver. I mean, other than he was Mr. Consistent, and it's unfortunate that his race ended today because I think he could have kept that streak up had they not kept him out. But he's been super impressive, and he's carrying a lot of Mercedes points right now. And I think now that they're both kind of up there and they have a car that can get them up there, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit more battle between them and Red Bull than Ferrari, unless Ferraris can kind of get their stuff together a little bit more.
Yeah, I thought Lewis was going to win for a second today.
Yeah,
he very well could have. It's just there was so many cars up at the front there from Sainz, Leclerc, Perez, Lewis, Alonso, Lando was around. I think there was so much going on at the end that it just kind of lucked out that he finished third. He had some great overtakes in the last 10 laps, passing two cars at once, getting cars back that got him immediately after. Lewis Hamilton's still the best driver on the grid, and until he retires, I'm not counting him out of anything.
Yeah. No, you can't doubt that guy for a second, because he'll always come back, and he just continues to show how good of a driver he really is.
Yeah, great tire management today. Fastest guy on the track all day. Just kept putting down fastest lap after fastest lap. And showed a good amount of racing. So I think obviously we know what he can do. I think if the car keeps complying, I think we will see more Lewis podiums. I think we'll see more George podiums. And I think we're going to see some Lewis wins.
I would also love to see a George win with Mercedes this year. And I'm confident that could happen. Will it happen? Yeah. Not 100%, but I do think it's very possible.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely my team to keep an eye on for the rest of the season. I think Red Bull, we know what we're going to get out of them. If nothing crazy happens, they're going to win both championships. I think the team that can actually challenge them the most right now is Mercedes. Toto doesn't shoot himself in the foot with strategy too much. He's a experienced team leader. Lewis can race in very high intense situations, and then they have George holding it down. George is going to be minimum 6th place every single race unless he DNFs or crashes like today. I think Mercedes could put something together. So yeah, that kind of wraps up talking about the top 3 teams, Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes. We'll quickly touch on the rest of the teams before we finish up in the next 10 minutes here, starting with none other than Mick Schumacher's maiden points in F1. Megan, how do you feel?
I am thrilled. I didn't know what to be more excited about. The Carlos win, the Mick in points. I was just yelling. I was very excited. The battle between him and Verstappen towards the end was very intense too, and I was very frustrated and I was very concerned because Mick has done this in the past where he's tried to pass someone and then they crash and then he loses everything. And I was very, very concerned that that was going to repeat itself. And I was like, sir, this is your first. Please, for your first, just take it. Just take it, you know? But I also think Max was being a little bit aggressive and not letting him in. And it was good for Mick to pull out because, you know, otherwise they would have crashed. But I don't think he necessarily should have been the one that was pulling out, but it's fine. I'm not bitter with Max. I'm just happy for Mick.
I don't know if you caught the very, very last turn. Mick did not pull out. He attacked him again going into the last
did
straight.
He?
They pulled
even.
I
didn't see that part.
They pulled even on the last straightaway, and then the Red Bull pulled away just because it's faster. One, very happy for Mick Schumacher. I know I give him a really hard time. Honestly, I think it's just kind of a funny bit at this point.
Yeah.
I think this is a good way for him to get the monkey off his back. What I want to see from here is he is obviously a good driver. He is a F2 champion. He is not a pay driver. He's not there because of his dad. He can drive. Yeah. And I think, like I said a couple of weeks ago, I think he was just getting the yips. And anytime he was about to be in a chance to score points, I think he was just kind of getting too nervous and shoot himself in the foot. I think from here, now that he doesn't have that pressure of never scoring points, I think he can just start to string together good performances week after week. And I think consistency is the best attribute you could have as a driver. And I think we're going to see a different Mick Schumacher from here on out. The second thing that I loved today, I know you were probably nervous while he was battling with Verstappen for the last lap. Mick Schumacher has some balls to... He was taking on the notoriously most aggressive driver on the grid. Max will crash both of you before he lets you pass. And Mick was just taking him on. And me and my dad, the front of the race was over, and me and my dad were still glued to the TV, just watching this go down. I had Mick crashed with Max and not scored the points, I would have not held it against him. I would have never given him crap about not scoring points in Formula One ever again. For me, that was what really mattered, because I think I said a month ago maybe that my biggest issue with Mick Schumacher is that he lets the race happen to him. You know, if he qualifies 10th and there's two cars faster than him, he's going to finish 12th. If he qualifies 13th and there's a car slower than him, he'll finish 12th.
Yeah.
Today, I think he showed that he can go out and race.
Yeah, because he passed multiple people, and it wasn't just because people were pitting, you know, other drivers were pitting or whatever. You know, he overtook Latifi, even his teammate, and Vettel, and then he tried with Max. And yeah, I think it was a really impressive race for him. I think it was a really good weekend, good result. Happy he has that weight off of his shoulder now. So I hope, you know, also seeing both Haas back in points. Yes, it was 8 and 10, but it's still back in points. It gives me a little bit hope that maybe we can see them again up there, you know, sometime in the future. We still have more than half a season to go, or about half a season still to go. So, you know, I'm very excited to see, you know, what else they can do. I don't think they'll be doing too many more upgrades this season. I think they'll probably pull a Aston Martin too, and, you know, come the summertime, if not before the end of this month, probably start working on next year's and just focusing on that more. But I mean, I still think we're going to get some good performance from them this year.
Yeah, I mean, if both drivers can start scoring semi-consistently, you know, 1 point, 5 point, 3 point here, there, it's going to be a lot for Lando to single-handedly hold off for McLaren, because Daniel has not been performing and not all, like we said, not all entirely his fault, but Daniel's not scoring points right now. Right. Lando can only hold off two drivers so much. I think the Alpine is going to be a little too fast for Haas to beat this year. Yeah. But I do think that they can start working on next year's car to have something along the level of the Alpine, and still put together some performances throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I think they're very comparable to, I think, Alfa Romeo right now, where they have a very unreliable car, but they have two drivers that could perform, that could be there, that
Yes.
could be competing with like the McLarens and the Alpines, but they're not there yet. They're just underneath. So I think, I'm excited to see what comes up next year, because I do think we're going to see a lot more of them battling. But yeah, I mean, we can go into McLaren now too, since we mentioned it. Obviously, there's not much to say. I think it was a pretty poor performance for Daniel. I think I can only keep saying it's the car for so long. I just don't think he has the pace with that car. I think that's a huge part of it too, and that's just kind of that. He was in P9 at one point, and I think he pit right before the yellow flag or something, and I think that's what kind of hurt it for him, because then he was ultimately down and didn't have time to catch up. And then for Lando, I mean, fighting with Alonso a little bit. He was up there too in the top 5 for a bit. Great race for him. It was his home race, so of course he was going to go all out. And I wish it, turned out a little bit better for him. But I think overall, great performance for him. I don't think he could have done much more.
Yeah, no, I think Lando was great today. Mm-hmm. McLaren's the most disappointing team on the grid, I think.
I know. Yeah, 100%.
That jump that Ferrari took this year, that was supposed to be McLaren. I feel like, I think they were on track to be the best of the rest. And for whatever reason, these new regulations just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to see more from them moving forward. I know there is some talks up in the air about their partnership with Mercedes, maybe ending, whether they're going to take on Audi as a partner, stay with Mercedes. I'm not really sure. I just need to see more out of the team,
Yeah. I'm a big McLaren fan, and I always will be, even if they are disappointing the crap out of us this year. But yeah, I mean, it's just whatever the strategy was for this new car this year, similar to Mercedes, it wasn't there with some of the others, and wasn't where they probably expected it to be. And maybe it's taken them a little bit longer than the Mercedes team to kind of get up there. So all we can hope for is either, come summer break, they, pull it out, or, just hope for next year.
Yeah. We can talk about Alpine briefly. Alonso got in the mix at the end. Ocon, I think he had some troubles at off the jump.
Which is, he was up in points for a lot of the race and was having a pretty impressive day, but then I don't know, I missed what happened with Ocon. I just thought that he was out and caused the yellow flag. So I don't know what happened there, but kind of unfortunate, because he was having a pretty good race otherwise.
Alonso got in the mix at the end. When I saw him pull up on everybody, I was like, oh, so they're gonna crash. I thought he was just gonna show up and just mess everything up, but no, I don't think he quite had the pace. So Charles, at that point when Alonso pulled up, Lewis and Checo were really fast, and I don't think Charles was. And I think once Lewis and Checo got past Charles, I think that kind of push that Alonso made. I don't think that Alonso was going to get past them, though.
And it's great to see him still pushing and, being one of the most competitive drivers up there, this season. That was not on my bucket list. Or my bingo card. That's for sure.
I was about to say, Megan showing Fernando Alonso some love. That's unheard of.
Just being nice. I'm being neutral right now.
He has had a bit of a career, public image kind of rehabilitation. He's a dick.
So yeah, I don't think he's a nice guy by any means. That's mainly why I'm not the nicest, I think, to him of all the drivers. But
Aston Martin, nothing doing. I think Stroll possibly had his worst race in F1.
Oh my god, man! That if anyone's been consistent this year too, it's Stroll being in the bottom sucked. 15.
Yeah, Stroll has sucked.
I don't think it's. I think it's not that Stroll is a bad driver, but I do think he's just him in the car are not clicking.
No, not at all. Seb did okay. Didn't finish in points or anything.
Yeah, he was in 9th. He was between he's been between Mick and Magnussen.
Williams, we talked about the Latifi masterclass in qualifying.
Albon is officially safe. They just like an hour
Yeah.
ago posted about that. So he's A-okay from the hospital. He was sent home from there. So
yeah, I think Alex came out okay. Latifi did not crash the car.
So win-win.
I think that's a win-win for Williams. I think that's about as much as you can ask for. I think that's all. Alfa Romeo, obviously we talked about Zhou for a while.
Yeah.
Bottas
had to retire.
Yeah, I think that's a good recap of the British Grand Prix. Red Bull fumbled a little bit. Checo saved the day for them. Mercedes, George out at the beginning. Lewis of his best race of the year.
Yep.
Ferrari once again being Ferrari, tying their arms behind their backs and trying to race. I don't know what has to change over there, but they're going to get left to the dust and caught by Mercedes soon.
Yeah. Do you have any predictions for the Austrian Grand Prix this coming weekend?
I think a Lewis win.
Okay. I was thinking George podium. Probably a Verstappen win. Probably a Red Bull 1-2.
Charles outside of the top 5.
Oh no.
I really think this season's going to start to fall apart for him.
I'm going to say another. Go on.
I was going to say there's some growing frustration between him and the team. He was getting a little talking to with a finger involved.
I
don't know if you saw that.
You sent that to me, yeah.
I think Charles is going to have a bit of bad luck for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think Mick will be in points again.
That would be impressive. You haven't done something until you've done it twice.
Exactly. So
yeah, we will be back next weekend or next week with another race recap for that. And I think that's all I've got.
Yeah, thanks for listening. If you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us on all the platforms. We'll be
Send us an email.
Send us an email. Brake check F1. Yeah.
First person to email us. If we ever make t-shirts, you'll get a t-shirt for free.
Yeah.
So that's how I'll know someone listened to the end. They heard this.
Yeah, and we're gonna get an email like hello from my mom probably.
It's gonna be my friend Ronnie or your mom. I think they're the two that have listened to every second of every episode.
I think so too.
But yeah, we will be back next week. Until then, we will talk to you later. Like Megan said, at BrakeCheck F1 on all our socials to keep up during the week.
Yeah,
that's about it. Box.
See you then. Box.